The impulse to recreate the world in paintings, sculptures, stories, and poetry has been a consistent feature of the human condition for millennia. These composers' representations of people and landscape at once help create and reflect the culture in which they were formed. From the 28,000-year-old Venus of Willendorf to Jeff Koons' pop art sculptures, people have always used the tools at their disposal to recreate and preserve aspects of the world that they value. As Donatart suggests, by focusing our often divided attention onto a tiny bit of our existence, artworks and representations have the power to explain profound truths about the world around us. Despite this, however, no matter how realistic or moving or iconic, an image or a text can never present the world directly as it is. No matter how objective a text aims to be, it will always be a construction, a representation rather than a mirror of the real thing. Artists, poets, photographers, cartographers, scientists, and Instagrammers all actively make choices in the way they represent the world around them. Choices about what to include and what to exclude, what to foreground and what to background. The composer's choice of omission and emphasis act as a kind of filter, capturing a composer's unique vision of the world around them. Instagram filters are so popular because they alter the banal details of the everyday, such as your morning coffee, by representing them in a new light. With a click, you can represent your mood, your personality, or your unique aesthetic by recasting the world as a moodier, brighter, or more black and white place. Ultimately, these choices speak to your values and context, reflecting the kind of person you are or wish to be. Those who preference black and white or sepia images may be nostalgic for a pure time of vinyl records and turtleneck sweaters, while those who increase the colour saturation in their images might value a more intense, vivid world. In your study of Module A, you will consider the relationship between various textual forms, media of production, and language, in order to consider the way a composer's choices can shape meaning and perspectives. Through studying the art of travel and your own related texts, you will consider the way different composers represent landscape and people in unique ways. You will gain insight into the processes involved in representation and will analyze composers' choices to gain a deeper insight into their values, context, and purpose. Ultimately, you will contemplate the way these representations can help both the composer and their audience see the world in a more focused, thoughtful way. As de Botton suggests, all artists select and highlight, and they record a genuine admiration insofar as their version of reality seems to bring out valuable features of it. Applying this idea to the art of Vincent van Gogh, de Botton asserts that the part of reality that concerned Van Gogh sometimes required distortion, omission, and substitution of colours in order to be brought to the fore. But it was still the real, the likeness that interested him. He was willing to sacrifice a naive realism in order to achieve a deeper sort of realism, behaving like a poet who, though less factual than a journalist in describing an event, may nonetheless reveal truths about it that find no place in the other's literal grid. Applying these ideas, I'd like you to compare and contrast the following representations of Sydney Harbour. Each is taken from a different period of history, and each is informed by its context. Hopefully you've come up with some interesting ideas from your discussion. I'd like you to consider these in the following artwork. Lili Nam is a South Korean artist who works mainly in video art installation. The following video is titled Gyeomjung and Cezanne and explores the way different perspectives and contexts can shape contrasting depictions of the same landscape. It also reiterates the idea that all things can be represented in drastically different ways. The first image you saw is by the painter Gyeomjung, who worked at the turn of the 17th century and is considered a formative artist in traditional Korean landscape art. Artists like Gyeomjung sought to evoke the beauty of calmness and emptiness in his landscapes. You might consider the lack of colour in the image and the way this emphasises the importance of composition and balance in capturing the beauty of the landscape. The next image is by Paul Cezanne, who was a French post-impressionist painter working at the turn of the 20th century. His work focused on colour, light and movement, using small repetitive brushstrokes to build up his scenes. His artworks are distinctive and they use the small frames of colour, which emphasise the vibrancy and geometry of the landscape. He was considered a major influence in art in the 20th century, with Picasso and Matisse claiming he was the father of us all. Finally, as you continue to watch, you might consider Lili Nam's purpose and perspective in unifying these images. Consider the quotes that will appear on the screen. What is the effect of unifying these images using 21st century technology? What is he considering about his audience in the way that he depicts these images? You might consider what is similar and different in these artists' view of the landscape. You might consider Nam's playful use of weather to animate the transition from 17th century Korea to 20th century France. What does that say about time? What does that say about seasons? What does that say about style and fashions? What insights do you gain into the effect of time and place on a composer's perspective? What's the effect of music? How does that make the artworks more interactive? And what insights do you gain into the way 21st century audiences view and value art? You might consider works of Lili Nam's as a related text for this unit. You might do some additional research into him as well. Finally, at the end of this video, as the seasons turn and we go back to Gyeomjung's original landscape painting, I'd like you to consider the quote that's at the end of this presentation. The quote is taken from Donna Tartt's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Goldfinch. It's a novel that deals with the purpose of art and the power of art in society. I'd like you to consider the ideas presented in the quote, whether or not you agree with them, and you might use some of the artworks that we've talked about today as a touch point.